I was said I was going to do it, and here we've done it. I've got Cern to come back, and he is going to be talking about the U.S. economy today, its impact on Tesla, and maybe kind of the opposite, Tesla's impact on the economy. Did I get that half right?
I think it's about half right. Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to turn you loose, Cern, and you can go ahead and tell your story your own way.
It remains to be seen which half, but I think at least half of that's right. Yeah. So thanks for having me back, Randy. I'd like to share with you, I think, what's one of the most important stories this week. Um,
Absolutely.
and this image is really quite amazing at Nvidia's developer conference. To see now, these are not the actual bots on the stage. This is on a screen.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive. There is one human in this photo.
Yeah.
It may be hard to tell, but yeah. Now, Tesla's Optimus bot is not pictured here,
Right.
but these are some of the other bot competitors. So
Yeah.
this will be an that
I
I
have
won't
this,
forget.
I have this theory that I'm probably 100% wrong on, that Tesla is absolutely talking to Nvidia and vice versa, that it's too important not to be in conversation. And of course, Tesla is a massive purchaser of Nvidia products. So I have this sense that there's conversations taking place.
I believe that you could be right, and certainly Jensen and Elon have a good relationship.
Right.
Yeah. Now, not to leave Tesla out, but this was also kind of an interesting piece of news in the last couple of days, is that Tesla is hiring a technician program manager for Tesla Bot to drive the deployment of robots for trial applications. Work will cover multiple job sites and may require frequent travel. So, Randy, I was thinking that you might like to apply for this job.
Yeah, this would be great. Boy, I'm telling you, this is a job built. It's requiring some kind of engineering skills. So, but the rest of it, I think I could do quite well. Thank you. Maybe
Yeah, the engineering part's not important. That's yeah,
I might do this one for free.
right. I think a lot of people would. Yeah. But this is a sign, certainly, that Tesla is gearing up to deploy the bot, at least internally.
I don't think
Um,
this is internal. It doesn't say that it's internal.
well,
It kind of
yeah,
in my reading of it, when you posted this the other day, my reading was, no, this is not internal. This is going out to third parties.
could be, and that would be even more exciting. Internal would be exciting, but third parties would be more exciting for sure. So we shall see.
Yep.
All right. So one of the things that we're all excited about with AI and bots is the prospect of productivity. And interestingly, even though we're in the early days of AI and bots really aren't even deployed yet, labor productivity actually just jumped to a 15-year high.
Yeah.
Now, I guess you could say, well, it's been languishing for so long. I mean, how difficult is that? I mean, it should be going up over time, and it hasn't been. So anyway, this is a good sign.
Yeah, I think just to linger on that for a second, because this channel is all about productivity. It's the number one thing that I think is underappreciated in terms of its impact on wealth, not just of the upper classes, but productivity impacts the lower classes even more than it does the upper classes. Is that, we had this massive run up as a result of computerization and then email and then the internet. So it took a while to kind of manage that. And I think that's what we've been doing for the last 15 years is we've been managing all of that increase.
Yeah, and we had a little thing called the global financial crisis here,
That too, yes.
right? Some weak economies here, and then the pandemic. And so there's been a couple of hits to the system
Right.
that have conspired against us here. Yeah, and this is, by the way, measured by last 12 months of revenue per employee is how they're looking at this.
Right.
Okay. And then another interesting sign is Procter & Gamble in Japan is going to use an AI-powered demand forecasting system in an attempt to cut its fleet of delivery trucks by 30%.
Yeah.
And this is not a small number. They would try to cut about 54,000 trucks.
Wow.
And one of the reasons is Japan will be facing an acute driver shortage beginning in April. There's new restrictions in terms of capping overtime hours for delivery drivers.
Now, see, this is another interesting thing because Walmart basically is Walmart because they did this 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Walmart's methodologies for basically they are managing every single item on the shelf every single minute. The information that they gather at retail is transmitted directly to the supplier on a daily or every other day or a weekly basis, depending on the supplier. That supplier, they don't even cut a purchase order. Walmart's computer information is available to the supplier, and the supplier ships based on the information they're getting right off the retail shelf. And so this dramatically cuts their costs of their overall supply chain compared to everybody else.
Yeah, and it's a great sign. This is Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble is a very old company based in Cincinnati. I used to live in Cincinnati. And one of the old jokes about Cincinnati actually is a quote from Mark Twain.
Yeah.
And he said that if the world was coming to an end, he would want to live in Cincinnati because things happened 10 years later there. So it's a good sign that a Cincinnati-based company is looking to deploy AI. That's a good sign. Yeah. Okay. So instead of bringing my bot jokes, which seem to go unappreciated by the likes of Scott Wolter, I thought I'd bring some cartoons today. These are not mine, but I thought this was a good one. People waiting for the Fed to cut interest rates.
Yeah. The bull is looking for a dove. I see. Yes.
Yeah. Now, you could argue that the stock market really hasn't cared too much. We're off to the 15th fastest start in the first 55 trading days that we've ever had since 1928.
Wow.
And for the most part, this worked out pretty well. Like right now, we're up 9.5%, and we don't know what the next, rest of the days in this year will be, and what the full calendar year return is going to be. But historically, things have looked pretty good,
Especially
with maybe three major exceptions.
Yeah.
1987, and then a couple of years in the Great Depression, 31 and 1930.
Right.
So hopefully those are outliers, and we're looking for sunny days ahead. Now, this is also interesting. The Wall Street likes to make price targets, which I don't know why they bother. And you can see right now that there's only one company with a price target higher than where the S&P currently is.
Wow.
So either they are, all wrong, and the previous chart might indicate that they likely are, or, this whole exercise, you've heard me rant and rave about this before, this whole exercise of price targets is a waste of time.
Right. So interesting.
This was a chart that we shared last week.
Yeah.
And nothing has changed. The numbers are the same.
Okay.
But this is this week's version of the chart. So there are three companies that have not done so well this year. One of them is Tesla.
Yeah.
But I thought this was kind of a cute representation of that. All right. Speaking of the Magnificent Seven, we talked last week about how those stocks have driven the stock market.
Yeah.
If you look at earnings growth, the Magnificent Seven over the last 4 years or so, earnings have gone up by 126%. And the S&P, without those stocks, the earnings would have only gone up 26%.
Wow.
Right. So for good reason, they have done well.
Yeah.
Okay. And then this is R&D as a percentage of sales. the Magnificent Seven is spending about 15% of their sales in R&D,
Mm-hmm.
and the rest of the S&P, excluding them, is only spending about 5.7%.
Yeah,
If R&D is a useful measure of, anything in the future,
sure.
that might be, might not be. Last week, we also talked about the addition of Amazon into the Dow, taking out Walgreens.
Right.
Which, when Walgreens was added, they kicked out GE. And as we talked about, GE outperformed Walgreens.
Right.
Now, this is another example. When Salesforce kicked out Exxon, Salesforce only went up 5% since then, and Exxon's up 203%. So the Dow Jones Industrial Index Committee has a terrible track record of selecting the constituents,
Right.
at least the last couple anyway.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hopefully adding Amazon is not a curse.
Exactly, exactly. Hopefully for Amazon's sake and Amazon
Amazon's,
stockholders.
that's right. And Amazon's a big company in the S&P, so that matters there too.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. All right, this I thought was astonishing. Saudi Aramco last year had profits of $121 billion.
It's a record of all time for any company, right?
No, it was down. It was down 25% from the
Oh,
prior year, where it was up, which was record breaking last year or 2 years ago at 161 billion.
okay, okay. That was the record.
Yes, that was the record in 2022.
Right.
So it was down 25%. It was a terrible year. It was down 25%. They still had more profit than Exxon, Amazon, Tesla, Walmart, Coca-Cola, CVS, McDonald's, and Ford.
Yes.
I'm sorry, $1 billion less than the combination of those companies.
Oh, I see. I get it. Okay.
Okay, add them all up, and you get Saudi Aramco in terms of profit.
Gotcha.
I don't know necessarily why those companies were picked instead
Yeah.
of Apple and Nvidia and so on. But anyway, it's still interesting that this
Well,
is how big.
I always use Apple as a great example because it's a nice round number. They're right around 100 billion. So it's easy to kind of compare people, how many apples are they? What percentage of an apple are they?
Right. I guess this comparison makes it look even worse if you have more companies than just Apple plus,
Yes.
plus Walmart and Coca-Cola.
Right.
Yeah. Now, oil. The United States has been blessed with a lot of oil, and we're doing a great job at producing it. And we're producing more oil now than we have ever, about 13.3 million barrels a day.
Mm-hmm.
And that is great from a sort of geopolitical stability standpoint, from an energy security standpoint. Those are all good things for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought this was a pretty amazing chart.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of folks in the community that will not be happy with that because we want to see the end of oil. But as I've pointed out repeatedly, until we get enough, I think we're building out green energy as fast as we can possibly build it out. I mean, there's already shortages of some of the components. Tesla has only been in the battery business for the mega pack battery business for a couple of years, building them out as fast as they possibly can. I mean, there's only so much you can do to get the green energy going. And if we reduce the amount of oil that we're producing and using, our natural gas, in particular natural gas, then the only people that are going to get hurt is going to be the poor.
That's right. And you have not seen these slides in advance, but you are spot on because we're going to talk about natural gas.
Okay, all right.
So the United States now is a net exporter of natural gas and not in some small way.
Right.
We are exporting a lot of natural gas to Europe. And you can imagine with the invasion in Ukraine and the reduction of gas shipments into Europe, we've helped to fill the void there. So that's been great.
And I'm always getting all the I don't know why the Northern European countries confused, but is it Norway that gets 98% of their energy from dams, but they are now the largest producer of oil and natural gas in Europe and supplying massive amounts of, is it Norway? I'm always getting confused.
It could well be. Norway certainly is a massive oil and gas
Right.
producer. And Norway is also one of the leading countries in the world, if not the leading country in terms of EV adoption.
Yeah, yeah.
So they've certainly showing the way for everybody else. Now, I don't know how to make this transition, but we're going to go from natural gas to cybercrime.
Okay.
I thought this was rather shocking, but again, the trend is not looking good here.
Hmm.
According to estimates from the FBI, American consumers and businesses lost 12.5 billion to internet crimes last year. 22% increase over the previous year.
Yeah.
And losses related to investment schemes in particular up 38%.
Hmm.
So this is a problem that's not going away.
I keep getting these invoices
Yeah.
in my email. Here's your invoice for for no, I never spent that money, so I don't know. Anyway, yeah, yeah.
The bottom line is if anybody's asking for you for money via the internet, email, text, you name it,
Yep.
voicemail, WhatsApp, DMs on Twitter, X, you should double and triple check that.
Yep.
And the challenge now with AI is they'll be able to make a voice sound like anybody else's voice.
Sure.
And because Randy's voice is on the internet, Randy's voice will be easily copied. And so, Randy, your family should be careful if they get a voicemail from you asking for money.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trapped here in this prison in Yugoslavia. Can you get me out?
Right.
Just $100,000 to these folks.
There's always a sense of urgency associated with these things. And usually if you just kind of slow it down, the wheels fall off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, rough transition, but I thought that was interesting to share.
Very interesting.
Now, this is also a rough transition from cybercrime to Japan. The number of marriages now has reached basically an all-time low.
Right.
And you can see the births versus the deaths, they crossed some time ago, but it continues to go the wrong direction.
Right.
And the prime minister of the country is saying it's now or never. We
Mm.
have to figure out a way to undo the country's declining birth rate.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they will do or what they will try to do, but it'll be interesting.
They will have to start with trying to convince people that it's okay to have sex, because the real statistic over there is that something on the order of 40% of the people under 30 have never had sex and don't ever expect to.
Mm.
I mean, I'm sorry, with another human being. They might have had sex, but they haven't had it with another human being.
Yeah. So anyway, that is an interesting one to watch. This is certainly one of the leading countries in the world, if you want to call it leading, in terms of demographic collapse.
Right.
With perhaps Italy not too far behind.
And they've just started allowing permanent immigration into their country. I want to say within the last 5 years, they are now up to 2% of their population is non-Japanese. 2%.
Wow. Yeah. All right. Now let's move from here to talking about inflation. So the problem lately is inflation's been a little sticky.
Yes.
And it's caused the Fed to sort of, hold off on cutting rates. But let's look at this a little closer. First of all, when you dig through the numbers, one of the reasons right now that we have high inflation is chocolate prices.
Right.
So stop eating chocolate, Randy.
And orange juice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not showing on this chart.
Okay, but orange juice is way up.
Yeah. And I guess being from Florida, maybe I'm protecting the Florida juice growers by not showing that.
And I live in the birthplace of oranges in Riverside, California.
So if we all stopped eating chocolate, then we could get CPI to come down and the Fed would cut rates.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting, just to dive into this a little bit deeper, the prices have basically, doubled, almost tripled from where they were not too long ago.
Yep.
So the question is, what's going on here? Is it because Randy is eating too much chocolate? And the answer is no. It's more of a supply thing. So 2/3 of the production of the beans is in the Ivory Coast in Ghana.
Hmm.
And they've had hot, dry conditions and changing weather patterns that have just destroyed crop yields.
Hmm.
And they've also had some trouble, shipping the product and stuff to Europe and so on. So they've just been kind of been hit with a perfect storm, so to speak, of
Yep.
challenges. So this is something that'll probably resolve itself at some point.
Hmm.
But if you stopped eating chocolate, that would help.
Yes.
All right. The other thing is the problem with CPI is shelter.
Right.
The shelter, if you look at CPI, including shelter, it's at 3.2% year over year. But if you exclude shelter, CPI is only 1.8%.
Hmm.
Okay. And the point this person's trying to make is when 60% of people own a house and they're locked in at rates, less than 3.5%, how much does this really matter?
Right.
Well, it matters to those that are affected by it, but that's a good point.
Hmm.
Okay. And then if we dive into a little further, if you look at more real-time measures of inflation with shelter, like for example, apartment rents,
No.
year over year, apartment rents are more like 1%,
Right.
whereas the shelter CPI is 5.7.
Right.
I'm sorry, apartment rents have declined by 1% year over year. They've gone negative.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the
There's a
idea,
just so you know, because on the channel we've been talking about this a lot. There's a lot of different data on that right now, and Truflation just increased their number to about almost 2% increase, but that's still a long way off from what the CPI is showing.
yeah. And then just one final chart on this. If you have CPI versus the real-time shelter measure, then by these folks at Wisdom Tree, CPI is 0.8%.
Oh, wow.
This is the 3.2.
Wow.
And then that is over the last 12 months. And then if you look at it with, I guess the middle one is similar, but basically inflation is a lot lower
Right.
if you look at any measure of real time.
And Fed Chairman Powell did say the other day that they do expect the rents to catch up, that they see this, they acknowledge that this is taking place, and they do
Yeah.
expect that the CPI and PCE will start to actually show this.
Yeah. So this was kind of a cute chart asking Edward Scissorhands if he would be Fed chairman.
Uh,
All right. Now we saw this chart, I think last week.
yeah,
Gasoline prices have continued to go up, which, yes, it's inflationary, but it also is something that slows the economy down.
right.
So it's, near term bad, but longer term helpful in terms of, further slowing the economy. And also, I would imagine the Fed would look at this and say, okay, yeah, we have to be careful about this.
Right.
Speaking of inflation or deflation,
Yep.
price of a used Tesla, I think we discussed this recently, down to 32,000. This is certainly helping keep
Mhm.
inflation down. So more people should buy Teslas.
Mhm.
You can do your part to drive inflation down if you buy a used Tesla.
That's right. That's right. And get another 4,000 off if it's under 25, I think, or under 30. I think it's 30,000.
Yeah. And this is the average price. So there's certainly plenty that are under.
Right.
Now, to touch another sore topic for a lot of Tesla investors is advertising. And I might suggest that Tesla use cardboard cutouts. Apparently, they're very effective in supermarkets.
Huh.
A cardboard cutout of doctors and nurses carrying health promoting messages led to a 20% rise in fresh sales and 30% increase in frozen fruit sales. So maybe cardboard cutouts of Elon somewhere talking about the benefits of EVs. I don't know. Just one idea. I'm not an advertising expert.
That's one idea.
All right. The global automotive sector is struggling. And this chart from AJ does a really nice job of showing this point.
Mhm.
This shows the free cash flow in the global automotive sector compared to Tesla.
Right.
Free cash flow is the ultimate thing. Basically, it's the profit less any capital expenditure.
Right.
It's the extra cash that the companies can do with whatever they want. And you can see Tesla pretty steady.
Mhm.
Okay. And I think this must be over a rolling period. So
Yeah.
I'm just trying to read the footnotes here.
Yeah, because Tesla didn't have any free cash flow until recently.
No, for the last few years they have. They actually, it's been quite impressive in terms of the
Oh, these are, oh, I'm sorry. These are 21, 22, and 23. Okay.
Yep.
That's good. That's fine. That works.
Yeah, and you can see in the fourth quarter last year that the global auto industry, their free cash dropped to negative 7 billion.
Right.
So if you think Tesla's hurting and struggling,
Mm-hmm.
it's nothing compared to the pain that the other automakers are going through.
Yeah.
Okay. And here actually AJ talks about it in his post. Price wars in the global automotive market have been pretty intense.
Mm-hmm.
So Tesla generates more cash than all large automakers combined for Q4 23 cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
And those automakers account for 50 million vehicle sales on an annual basis.
Right.
Okay. So, and here's another way of looking at it. Tesla basically at the top of the heap, and ex-Tesla, all those companies, negative 7 billion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So a Toyota, Hyundai, BMW, Rivian, Honda, Suzuki, GM, all negative in the last quarter.
Yeah.
So the automotive industry is highly cyclical, very challenging industry. And so looking at Tesla's price cuts that they did, over a year ago, through a different lens of Elon could see difficult times coming.
Mm-hmm.
It's better to run a factory at full capacity or as close to as you can and make less on the cars.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly if you can also put the hurt on your competition.
Right.
And that's precisely what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
And many of these companies too now have shelved their plans or backpedaled on their plans to build EVs.
Mm-hmm.
And so then when they try to go back into EVs again, they're going to be behind even more. So through the lens of time, actually, Tesla's strategy may look really, really smart.
Indeed.
Through the eyes of Wall Street, it looks idiotic.
Right.
But that's a very short-term focused. Looking at it through a longer term, it may actually prove to be a very, very smart strategy.
Well, especially if we get to plop an FSD on a bunch of them.
The larger the fleet out there, then the greater the value of FSD will be. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. This is from Sam Koros at ARC. And I'm sorry that a lot of these charts are sort of about EVs and Tesla today, but this I think is pretty important information. The narrative has been that EV sales are slowing. Nobody wants EVs.
Yeah.
When in reality, nobody wants EVs from, non-Tesla competitors. Right. But what Sam is trying to say here, even though the EV growth rate is slowed, that EVs as a percentage of the total sales is going up.
Right.
And this is what matters. And so he's saying here that the world hit peak gas-powered vehicle sales in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, the industry has been in decline.
Mm-hmm.
And EVs picking up that share, and the hybrids are in there as well. But just pure electric,
Right.
it's growing market share over time. And actually, if you look at adoption curves, you should expect that the EV growth rate will slow. That's actually how the adoption curve gets its shape.
Hmm.
It has high growth rates in the beginning, right? Low adoption. And then as that curve starts to pick up, the growth rate slows down.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing may not be so abnormal. That just may be what we should be expecting.
Yeah, I think the concern, well, I don't think anybody's looking at it deeply. I think it's a little early in the S curve to have this reduction. But I'm not 100% sure that we're gonna see the reduction. So we haven't, we're just barely into 2024. 2023 was a fine year for EVs, BEVs even.
Yeah.
And 2024, we're a long way from knowing how 2024 plays out.
Well, we can't forget what's been going on in the global automotive market. It's been a brutal time,
Right.
just in general. If anytime you have interest rates go up by so much, it's a kind of a shock to the system. And so that definitely slows things down. So these S curves are kind of, by themselves, all things being equal. But in
Right.
reality, there's a whole bunch of things hitting
Sure.
this and influencing it,
Sure. Right.
not to mention government policies and all kinds of stuff. And so here's how the global battery electric market share looks. Still an estimate for 2023 of, let's say, 12, 13%.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, it's headed in the right direction. There's going to be some bumps along the way,
Sure.
but the trend is not turning around.
Right.
Okay. Now, to hit a really sore spot for Tesla shareholders, we are now at 865 trading days from the peak.
Okay. 860.
And the good news is that that's in line with two other pretty long periods. Hopefully, we don't have to wait 939 trading days. But if the past is any guide, and it isn't, but if we want to look at nice charts and glean some hope, hopefully we're nearing the point where, things will turn. And we're definitely seeing that fundamentally from the development of FSD and the development of bots and everything else.
Right. Yeah. It just takes one slight breakthrough and or a beat. Obviously, if we have a significant beat in expectations on unit sales or price increases that are reflecting strength in the underlying demand, uh, we could see the beginnings of a pretty good rise.
Yeah. Um, I thought this was kind of funny when I think about a lot of Wall Street folks. On the bull that doesn't do the math.
Yep. Yep.
A lot of Wall Streeters, as we've talked about, like to use PE ratios and other shortcut measures. That's not how you do it.
Mhm.
They may say that's what everybody does, but that's not really how you do it. Anyway, that was a good one. And we started with bots. Let's finish with bots. We're now in kind of the March Madness period.
Yeah.
And I put together this World Bot Championship bracket.
I see.
And what's interesting about this is that somehow Roomba made the list.
Okay.
It's not humanoid, but some
Right.
people consider it to be a robot. I know Scott Walter doesn't consider Roomba to be a robot, but it's on the list. And the concern is that they may sweep the competition. But anyway, this was a pretty good visual of many of the different
It
bot
took me a
projects.
minute, Cern.
Yeah,
I
well, I'm
finally
waiting
got
for the
it.
groans.
Yeah, yeah. I'll groan now. Oh,
Yeah.
there you
Now, not all these bots are in the same league, and it's like the NCAA basketball tournament. Not all the teams can win.
right.
And by the way, the lowest ranked team to ever win is Villanova, that when they were ranked 8th.
Wow.
So a lot of the bots on here have no chance of winning.
Right.
But the proliferation of bots and bot projects is impressive. But many of these are playing in different games than Tesla is, and Figure, and Apptronic, and Sanctuary, and some of the others.
So Jeff Lutz made a statement last night. I'm pretty sure it was Jeff. It could have been Scott yesterday, but I think it was Scott. When I say yesterday, Wednesday. I think it was Jeff, that as far as we know at this point, and maybe you, Cern, maybe you know something that we don't, zero of these other companies have any real manufacturing experience or capability.
Well, Boston Dynamics is owned by Hyundai.
Yeah, but that's Hyundai. That's not, yeah, it's not
right?
them. It's a division. Yeah,
So, you know, um, Xpeng or Xiaopeng is an automaker,
right.
so that remains to be seen. Now, I have said that making bots is different than making EVs.
Yeah.
For one, it gets to piggyback on the success of EVs and particularly the battery supply chain.
Hmm.
They don't need to reinvent that.
Hmm.
That helps. They do need to make actuators, and that's an industry apparently where the existing actuator industry is not making what the bot makers need.
Exactly.
Now, I think that the actuator industry will probably rise to the occasion over time.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of companies in China, in particular, Southeast Asia, that make actuators, and I'm sure that they are doing what they need to do to start making ones that bot makers need,
Right.
particularly for the Chinese makers.
Right.
Secondly, you do not need to build a bot gigafactory.
No.
The mass of the bot is 3% of a Model 3. You don't need the big machines and push the same amount of material through a factory to make bots. And so it's very different. It's not going to be as capital intensive.
Hmm.
It's not going to have the same level of fixed costs that making EVs does. And so there's a lot of people out there drawing similarities to EVs and bots, and I think it's the wrong way to look at it. It's not
No,
going to be the same challenges.
yeah, it's not nearly as complicated as a car, but
Yeah,
it's still not uncomplicated. And,
correct.
and
Yep.
you mentioned the actuators, and I have, if there's anything in life that I have a problem with is over optimism. And I know that in my experience, I've developed either developed in my own factories or helped other companies develop. I'm going to say, I don't know, something close to 1,000 products over the last 50 years. And you have the product and it's a very simple product and you think everything's going great until it's in the field for 6 months. And I've seen so many different things happen after it's in the field for 6 months that I could write a book. Oh yeah, I probably have. Anyway, it's, but there's, I had a situation one time with a plastic tire and we thought we were absolutely going to go to, living feet up in Hawaii because a plastic bicycle tire that actually could grip, actually,
Mhm.
and this was a polyurethane tire, so it had some gripping capability. It was in so many ways, it was just wonderful. It only took a little while though in the 110-degree Arizona sun to melt the polyurethane tire. Didn't happen even in West Los Angeles or in Santa Barbara, the places we were testing it. But as soon as we sent it over to Arizona, all of a sudden we had a problem that could not be resolved. It was just,
Yeah.
yeah. So these bot makers, these folks that are going to get into the manufacturing of the bots, they've got all kinds of potential for failures with these brand new. They'll be building these actuators and some of these other parts for the very first time, and putting through stress tests and in different environments. And I think it was Scott or somebody that mentioned a couple of weeks ago the amount of work that these are going to do. If they're working 24 hours a day or 18 hours a day, 20 hours a day, 22 hours a day, 7 days a week, the repeat motions over and over and over again, you're going to have these actuators are not only going to have the power, they're not only going to have the consistency in terms of their ability to work, they're not only going to have to be smooth. I mean, all the kinds of things you think of, but man, they're going to have to really last a very long time under stress.
Yeah. And I certainly would not argue that Tesla is not in the strongest position.
Yeah.
Sorry for the double negative. Tesla is in the strongest position. But I also believe that other companies will rise to the occasion and will make these things in decent amounts. And I also think that actually the supply of bots, even if Tesla is successful in making, millions of these a
Right,
year,
right.
we're going to be supply constrained for a long time.
For a very long time.
And so that opens the door for lots of other companies to throw their hat in the ring and try this.
Mhm.
Now, to your point, there may be problems down the line in terms of how long do these bots last,
Right.
right? And frankly, Tesla may have their own challenges with
Sure.
that too,
Absolutely.
right? So that's going to be interesting. But the business model for bots is pretty forgiving in that the profit potential is pretty large.
Yeah.
And so even if these companies have to replace actuators every 6 months,
Mhm.
it's not a death knell for them.
Right.
Assuming they can get the cost of these things down to some reasonable level, and ultimately I'm sure they will. So it's not like EVs. It's going to be hard, but I just don't see it being the massive capital, suck that EVs have been for the automakers.
Right. Right. By,
Um,
by the way, I love your March Madness chart. It's maybe your best chart ever.
well, thank you. I should give credit to Scott. It was his idea,
Okay.
but ideas are cheap. You have to be able to execute. And Scott didn't make one, so I made it. But I give credit to him. Thank you, Scott, for the idea. It was a brilliant idea.
All right. All right. Well, does that conclude this week's? Yes, that concludes this week's financial analysis. So what did you think of the Fed's talk on Wednesday? How do you read what we're looking at going forward?
You know, I take the Fed at their word at this point. Uh, and actually, I give them maybe more credit right now than perhaps they deserve, but I think they've navigated the economy and the situation fairly well. Um, I'm kind of in the camp that I wish the Fed, wouldn't monkey with things as much as they do. But if we're going to have an economy that we try to control, I think that the Fed has done a reasonable job navigating this. They were certainly late to increase interest rates, and so they've been behind the curve. But now, in terms of this massive rate increase where everybody thought they were going to destroy the economy, that didn't happen.
Mhm.
We had the fastest increase in rates we've ever seen. Um, and so, credit to them in terms of being that aggressive. Um, they could have avoided all that, in my opinion, but they didn't. And I think that we're going to slide into, the second half of the year, and they'll start cutting rates. The Swiss National Bank today cut rates by a quarter point. So the first major one to do it.
Okay.
So the Swiss are leading that, and they may give cover to other nations to start cutting rates as well.
Yeah, I'm going to say it for the very first time here. Maybe I did say it once before on the channel. There's a chance that the Fed still acted too early on raising rates. But I don't fault them for it because I think they could not have stood the political pressure
Yeah.
any longer. But I think there's a real good chance that the boom bust would have self-corrected. I almost 100% sure that they were right all along that it was transitory because it fit the boom
Yep.
bust perfectly. I've seen too
Yeah.
many of them. And I've talked about that a lot on the channel. So I think there's a pretty good chance it would have self-corrected. But I think that there was no way they could have resisted putting the rates up because it was just um, the pain was too great, and the potential for more pain was too great. I think they probably had to act.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in the camp that says just let the market forces, manage interest rates, and generally the market does a pretty good job of that. Now, I would say that sometimes in a time of crisis, it is kind of nice to have a steady hand, if you can call the Fed that.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not quite sure how we would have gotten through the financial crisis if it wasn't for some of the actions that the Fed took.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right? It could have been a lot uglier than it was. It was
It,
pretty ugly.
it was pretty ugly.
Right? So, I like to find a lot of fault with the Fed, but overall, I think that they've done a decent job this time around. I think it's been frustrating for a lot of people that they haven't cut rates yet,
Mhm, mhm.
but they will get there.
Yeah, yeah. And another thing, just to maybe to conclude, everybody needs to really take a deep breath and go, 5.25 is not high.
Exactly.
It's average. It's average,
Probably even below average.
probably even below average.
Yeah.
Cern, thank you as always for helping us kind of understand things in a more visual, in a more interesting way. I think, you know, I again applaud your chart making capabilities and we'll look forward to getting more of that next Thursday. And who knows, maybe another Saturday show as well. And, but again, thank you so much for helping out. And to all of you out there, it's been great talking to you.
Thanks, Randy.